Hi class. So this lecture is about the connective tissue. So the connective tissue is the most abundant, widely distributed primary tissue. So the major function of the connective tissue is binding and support, protecting and insulating, storing reserve fuel, and transporting substances through blood. So there are four main classes of the connective tissue. So the connective tissue proper, cartilage, bone, and blood. So there are four, but we can also look at that there's five types of connective tissue, because there's blood and there could be lymph, right? So that's how you can count like blood and lymph. Or within connective tissue proper, there are two subdivisions. So we're going to look at that. So pay attention to this particular image. So there's a connective tissue proper that has a loose connective tissue type and has a dense type of connective tissue. And there are subcategories. Under the loose, areolar, adipose, and the reticular connective tissue. And as the name implies, loose connective tissue, it means that the fibers are loosely spread out within the tissue, within the space. Dense connective tissue fibers are packed near one another densely. So for example, with the loose connective tissue, like fibers, they kind of away one from another, and there's a space in between. Remember, in class we discussed the matrix and the ground substance. So here are your fibers: reticular fibers, elastic fibers, collagen fibers, collagen, elastic, and reticular fibers. So, and you see I have these fibers kind of spread out, and there's a ground substance, water, in between. So let's say within the loose connective tissue, fibers are kind of away one from another, and there's a space in between. With a dense connective tissue, fibers are close one to another. I'm going to show you the example. So then within the connective tissue also we have a cartilage, and cartilage also has three subdivisions: cartilage, hyaline cartilage, elastic cartilage, and fibrocartilage. And then we have a bone, does not have subdivisions, and then there's a blood. So blood and the lymph. So but let's stick with blood. So there's a different types of connective tissue. So subclasses: loose connective tissue, areolar, adipose, reticular; dense connective tissue, regular, irregular, elastic. And within the loose connective tissue, we did not discuss this, but let me introduce this. Maybe I mentioned that the type of cells that make up this type of tissues. So the blast, the suffix blast, meaning that the cells are immature, let's say stem cells, so they're making new cells. So fibroblasts are making collagen. And to put it in perspective, here's the cartilage. To make cartilage, you need other type of stem cells, like say blasts. So there would be chondra. So when we say chondroblasts, that's in relation to cartilage. When we say fibroblast, that's in relation to collagen. Collagen is like a jelly type of substance, and cartilage is more denser fibroblast, gel-like ground substance, because there's a space in between. Fibrocytes, these are already mature cells, so the fibroblasts will turn into fibrocytes. So their major function is to bind the tissue, resist mechanical stress, particularly tension. Remember in class we discussed the tension is the stretching, provides reservoir for water because it's a loose connective tissue and there's a lot of space in between. So you see here's elastic fiber, so here's a ground substance. So there's a fibroblasts that are making new new cells. So this is the mature. There's a collagen fibers. So you see there's a lot of space. It's like white space. That's the liquid. That's the water. So this is an areolar type of tissue, right? Areolar tissue. And then there's a adipose tissue, and then there's a reticular tissue. So they are all part of the loose connective tissue. So here is the adipose tissue. In class I mentioned that you can recognize adipose tissue just by looking at the cells. So the nucleus is pressed up against the wall. So loose connective tissue, you store energy, you store fat, and then reticular connective tissue. So it's better to compare reticular with a areolar connective tissue. You see, with areolar connective tissue, fibers are spread out. With a reticular connective tissue, fibers are packed near one another, so it's more density and there's less space. So dense connective tissue. Dense connective tissue has regular, irregular, and elastic connective tissue. So the regular collagen fibers, they run parallel one to another. Irregular collagen fibers, they run parallel and opposite, so they're basically running in different directions. So let's look at a regular connective tissue, right? Connective tissue proper, dense, regular connective tissue. You see fibers, they're running parallel one to another. So, and this mostly comes with the tendons and the ligaments. So the tendon is part of the muscle that connects muscle to the bone, and the ligament connects bone to the bone. So it's basically, you will find this within the tendons, within the joints, where the muscle need to be connected to the bone, or the ligaments where the bone is needed to be connected to the bone. So these are the regular connective tissue, and here is irregular connective tissue. So here it's hard to see, but you see the fibers, they're running in different directions. Here, regular connective tissue fibers running one direction. So basically tendon, when the muscle is connected to the bone, when there is a pull, so you're only pulling into one direction. With irregular connective tissue, let's say here, the shoulder joint, so not necessarily that could be with the bone, but the regular connective tissue you can find within the kidneys and within the muscles and the nerves, because that particular organ would be pulled in different directions. So, and here is the dense elastic connective tissue. So the great example of the elastic dense connective tissue would be an artery, because there's a constantly blood being passed through the artery, and there's a great deal of pressure, so that's elastic, so it needs to expand, it has to recoil, come back to its original size. So an example like aorta within the cardiovascular system. Then another category, cartilage. Cartilage is a gel-like ground substance similar to a collagen. So here they have a different look, they're kind of circular, not necessarily like oval, and there's like nucleus in between. So the cartilage resists compression because of the large amount of water that's within the matrix. So the major function is to cushion and support body structures, and usually we find them within the joints. We will be talking a lot about the joints in the skeletal system. So here's an example on the cartilage. Also there's elastic, but there's elastic cartilage. So here was the elastic dense connective tissue, and here's the elastic cartilage. So the most flexible is the elastic cartilage. Then there's a hyaline cartilage, denser, and then there's a fibrocartilage, the most dense type of cartilage out of all three cartilages. So the elastic cartilage, where do you find elastic cartilage? And it's very easy when it comes to cartilages to remember where can you find cartilage. So the elastic cartilage you can find in the ears, and you see the ear can spring back off, so it comes back to its original place. So, and you can bend the ears, so that's an elastic cartilage. So it maintains the shape of the structure, allowing strength and stretchability. I can stretch it and it comes back. So the most abundant cartilage, like 80% of the cartilages within the body, it's called hyaline cartilage. So here's the hyaline cartilage. There's a ground substance as well. So, and what I forgot to mention, how do you able to tell the differences between hyaline cartilage, fibrocartilage, or elastic cartilage? So the elastic cartilage, under the microscope, you see this chondrocyte and lacuna. Lacuna is the space. So it's like an egg on a pan. So when you look under the microscope, elastic cartilage looks like this, an egg on a pan. When it comes to hyaline cartilage, looks like a footsteps, right? Like a footsteps, like that. So most abundant cartilage gives like a bluish appearance, flexible and very resilient, absorb compression at joints, make up the most of the skeleton. So when we're going to discuss the skeletal system, you will see that within the costal ridges, within the ribs, so there's a cartilage, the hyaline cartilage, the trachea or trachea, so there's a cartilage, the tip of the nose, so there's a cartilage, not here, here's the bone, but the tip of the nose is the cartilage, and at the end of the long bones, also the hyaline cartilage. So the tips of the long bones, nose, trachea, larynx, the voice box, the throat, and the cartilages of the ribs. So that's where you find mostly the hyaline cartilage. And then the denser, compared to other two, is the fibrocartilage. So there's like a river, and there's like also dots there. So that's how you can tell the differences between three types of cartilages. But you see, when you look at the fibrocartilage, or when you look at a regular dense connective tissue, kind of similar one to another, but this one, dense irregular connective tissue, doesn't have those dark eyes or dots. So that's how you are able to recognize them under the microscope. So the fibrocartilage found in places where you need to absorb and resist a lot of compression and tension and withstand the heavy pressure. So within the spinal column, so there's the vertebrates, and here's intervertebral disc. So basically in between the vertebrates. Pubic symphysis, so the hip bones connected one to another. So that's where you mostly find the fibrocartilage. And also within the knee meniscus, so this meniscus right here, so that's a fibrocartilage, but this is the hyaline cartilage. So of the one bone, and here's another bone, here's the hyaline cartilage, but the meniscus made of the fibrocartilage. We will discuss this in the skeletal system. So the next is the most dense type of the tissue, is the bone, or we can call it as osseous type of tissue. Osseous means bone, made by osteoblast, right? Osseous, osteoblast, fibro, fibroblast, chondro, chondroblast, osseous, osteoblasts, bone. And the mature cells would be osteocytes. We will discuss the cells a lot in the skeletal system. So the gel-like ground substance calcification meaning that it will solidify. So there's also fibers. There's also fibers of collagen there within the bone, but mostly it's very dense type of connective tissue, hard tissue that resists both compression and tension. Even though bones are flexible, they can bend, but it all depends on the stress, right? But they do resist compression and tension, but there's a minimal compression and tension on the bone, especially when you're walking and jumping. And then there's another type of tissue, circulating connective tissue, blood. But the major function of the blood is to carry oxygen into the tissues, remove carbon dioxide, bring nutrients into the tissue, and remove the waste. So here's the bone, very dense, osseous tissue, has more collagen. Bone has a collagen, that's why bones are flexible compared to cartilage. Cartilage you find at the end of the long bones, right? But the collagen you find within the bones. And here's the connective tissue, right? Circulating connective tissue, blood. So this is the red blood cells, this is the white blood cells. So, and there's a plasma, right? So that's water, basically. So this slide is basically summarizes everything. So, but I put them from the least dense type of connective tissue to the most dense type of connective tissue. So the circulating connective tissue, like blood and lymph. Then there's a loose connective tissue, areolar, adipose, and there's a reticular. Then there's a dense connective tissue, irregular, regular, and elastic. Then there's a cartilage. Here's the cartilage, elastic cartilage, hyaline cartilage, fibrocartilage, and then there's a bone. So that basically summarizes all of the types of connective tissue.